Hi, I'm Tom Stephenson. Welcome to Lecture 9B, Principles of Construction Ethics and Integrity. And as I mentioned in 9A, I've used a few quotes here from Warren Buffett. I think I have one at the end here, at the end of this lecture as well. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. Warren Buffett. And we could also categorize the difference between reputation, which is what other people think of you, and character, which is kind of like what you think about yourself. And so sometimes people's reputations can be ruined by things that maybe were outside their control. As long as internally they have good character, that can be helpful as well. But it does, as Warren Buffett say, it doesn't take much to ruin a reputation. And so you want to be cognizant of that in how you act and behave in your professional and personal endeavors for that matter. So these outcomes we've been looking at, 1 and 2, and as I mentioned, we'll review a case of a construction company and how they act on unethical behavior. So how they ensure that they are acting ethically. Basically, they have what they call a subcontractor bill of rights. Mishandling sensitive information. So we're continuing on with our topics of potentially unethical dealings and behaviors. And so mishandling of sensitive information is a problem from that perspective. Disclosing bid information directly related to bid shopping, illegally reporting, sensitive information, knowing that it may give somebody else a competitive advantages like trade secrets and things of that nature. Those types of things go on in every business, unfortunately, but that would be an unethical thing for anyone to do under those circumstances, right? Misrepresentation of financial status or records. Maybe you are trying to get your company bonded. Maybe you're trying to get loans and you're providing information that is not true. And you get the loan as a result of this fictitious information. I think they use the term cooking the books would be one aspect. And so consequences could be criminal, lawsuits, investor loss of money, bankruptcy, folding of the company. Failure to protect the environment. Construction, unfortunately, it lends itself to some really unethical behavior when for example, it comes to waste control. Some companies will dump things illegally. So maybe you've got a brownfield site and you have soil that's contaminated and it's put into a dump truck and it's dumped somewhere on somebody's property and just driven off. We've all seen these sort of piles sitting somewhere where some unethical company or driver just drops their load somewhere and causes all kinds of cost problems and environmental problems, etc. So not a very pleasant thing to have happen, but unfortunately it does happen. Or also not following environmental standards and regulations and going ahead and doing the work with disregard to that. Those would be unethical practices, right? And of course it damages the environment and it causes all kinds of damage to the community that it occurs in. So consequences typically are large fines, lawsuits, and site shutdown, project cancellation perhaps. So really just it comes down to planning and doing good work with it and following regulatory requirements and ensuring that the people that you have working for you are also behaving ethically as well, because their behavior can be a reflection of your company. Failure to protect public health, safety, or welfare, air pollution, toxins, contamination, objects falling, not properly protecting things on a roof, being carelessness. That's not acceptable when it can infringe upon others' well-being and lives. It's a pretty big windstorm out there today, and I'm thinking about some of the construction sites where there's things on roofs and things not properly tied down, where it could potentially blow off the roof and could cause damage. I've had some of the laborers at International Union Liuna tell me that they've been on projects where sheets of plywood have flown off the top of a condominium building that are like 30 floors up. Not a good situation. Kill somebody on the ground, right? Failure to protect public health, safety, or welfare. Those would be items that come into problems as these points illustrate. Failure to recognize employee or subcontractor concerns with regards to things like, or reconcile employee or subcontractor concerns, like change orders, where contractors leverage and cut the change order prices, right? And they profit from it, but the subcontractor does not. Or subcontractors that inflate the change orders. I've heard of that too, and some will inflate it knowing that the contractor is going to cut them down. So I don't know, in a case like that, I don't know who's right or who's wrong. Both are equally at guilt, and I think they end up in the same place anyways if they had just acted transparently in the first place. Owners disputes change orders. Somebody that just disputes them for the sake of disputing them. I won't say that there's not certain politicians down south that tend to do that with election results, but it's the same kind of idea where, you know, somebody's just disputing something just to try to leverage it and work the price down. Consequences, lawsuits, increase of project costs, strain of project relationship, strikes, broken contracts, all kinds of ill will, and then somebody also then trying to get back and not doing something ethically on their own side of things. It causes a lot of problems in the construction industries. The best way to deal with that sort of thing with change orders is to be transparent and have excellent documentation. As you'll learn more in the construction industry, documentation and being able to sell and negotiate on good documentation and transparency are the sort of the platitudes of running an excellent business. Without that documentation, you have problems, especially with unethical players. Failure to reconcile employee or subcontractor concerns, not addressing employee claims of harassment, unethical rights among employees, not fair and equitable treatment. We have all kinds of human rights legislation in Canada, but it's not ethical to have those kind of events occurring on your projects on an ongoing basis. And that hurts morale, that hurts retention. The best employees, you know what? If I'm in a toxic environment and I'm working in a toxic environment and I'm really good at what I do, why would I want to stay there? I don't think I want to stay there. I would go somewhere else. And you know what? I won't have any trouble in the construction industry going somewhere else. So what are you left with? You're left with a company full of toxic people. That's what you're left with. Do you want that? That's not a good situation. It's not good sound business practice as well. So these are some of the consequences of not having those kind of results. And that's why it's important that companies respect employees that see something and say something and make sure that actions are being taken to resolve them. Not companies that hide things and don't pay attention to them and then fire the wrong employee who's being honest. Doesn't set the right example, not at all. So perform change orders according to the procedure, have processes in place, do not inflate or deflate just because of reputation of claimer. Look at each change order on an individual basis and treat your employees equally and develop a consistent procedure for all employee claims and processes. Abuse of company resources, overusing of an expense account, purchasing, taking office supply. There's all these little things that become big things, and it becomes a systemic issue. And then when you have these, it spills out into other areas, and then that becomes a problem. Ethical behavior means that you are acting ethically, and that means that if you have an expense account, you're using it for the betterment of the business, not for your personal betterment. And keep that in mind. So develop miscellaneous project expense reports. So make sure that you have identifiable project expense reports that are applicable to wherever the spending is being done, so you can track it and make sure that you can track it and account for it. Sometimes these things, they don't show up right away, and the person or the perpetrator thinks that they got away with it, and then all of a sudden there's a little bit of an investigation or an audit, and then all this information comes to the forefront. Excessive change orders, this occurs too. Asking for money and time to gain, there's trying to make unnecessary claims, trying to get paid for things that were actually part of your contract to do, trying to dream up interferences that are billable, that becomes a problem too. And some contractors, they'll try to be they'll end up being the low bid, and then they work at trying to get the money back through changes. Well, number one, change orders is a very difficult thing to be profitable on, so that's a bad tactic for sure. Number two, you're going to not retain clients that way. Who wants to work with you when you're doing that? So it's going to give you a bad reputation. You're going to be spending a lot of time with lawyers, and the project is going to not run or flow very well. So act honestly, calculate market prices for your change orders. Should make a profit. What is this going to take? What is this? Make sure it's clear, and create a log of all your material labor times so that you can accurately justify it. Documentation, and put yourself in the other person's shoes. Look at it from their perspective, and what would you need to be able to justify that this is true, and then provide it. Discrimination, favoritism, harassment, we kind of already talked about that, but setting the right kind of culture in your business and making it clear what's unacceptable behavior, and acting on that when it is occurring in a negative way. So very important to not let these things tend to slide, and then they become habit and routine of the culture, and then it's a downward spiral from there. So all of these things flow in together that way. Downward spiral. Treat everyone equally. Treat everyone like you would treat your mother. Develop an HR program that will train against these unethical acts. And make sure that people are not afraid to say things, as I mentioned earlier. If there's something that is going on, do you want it to be swept under the carpet just to fester and become a bigger issue? I don't think you do. I think you want to get it out in the forefront, work it out, resolve it, and move on. Otherwise, it's just something that you're not even aware of as a business owner that's happening. So you want to take it from that perspective. And, treating everyone equally doesn't always mean you treat them exactly the same, right? Different people need to be adjusted in how you communicate and things like that, but you definitely want to be equal in how they're actually being treated, right? Doesn't mean exactly the way you point things out and that sort of thing. There's different adjustments that we have to make with our soft skills, but definitely you're not giving undue advantage to someone over someone else just because of who they are, or their background, or their race, or any of those types of things, or gender. Improper relations with clients and contractors, so nepotism, bestowed favoritism, showing the basis of family or friendship can be problematic if it's favoring somebody over somebody else unfairly, unequitably. Results, contractors awarding jobs to family and friends of the deserving bidder. You're just using the deserving bidder, and then usually the bid shopping is going on in the background. That's not ethical. This has become a big deal over the last 25, 30 years, right? accepting bribes and gifts, and many companies have policies around this. Even it used to be fairly commonplace to get Blue Jay tickets or something of that nature. So these things need to be, there needs to be a company policy. They need to be reported. So if you have something that you think maybe comes under this jurisdiction, when is it acceptable to do it? And so you have a third party within the company, your HR department, that reviews it and makes sure this is not going to overly influence you. So the person gets you tickets to a baseball game, and now you go to the baseball game, and now you award them a project when really they shouldn't have been awarded that project. You're awarding it because of the baseball tickets or something worse, right? Like a bigger bribe. Where does it stop? So it's trying to make sure that these things are kept in check and that they are followed in that way. And in some cases, big bribes can be resulted in jail time. SNC Lavalin, some of their executives ran into that issue. There were bribes, I think, in one of the Montreal hospitals and in some of the international work that they were doing globally. And so you want to make sure that you are not bribing a government officer so that you can get a project is illegal, and that could definitely end up in jail time, and it could possibly end up in billions of dollars in fines if you're a big company like SNC Lavalin, or it could potentially bankrupt you. So do not accept gifts from clients, contractors, etc. Hire based on qualifications and competence, not personal familial relationships. If hiring for a project or job and a family or friend applies, ask an independent third party to assist so that you're not unduly biased or influenced. So I have this little case study that I will review, and it's really, we talked about bid shopping, and another one that's unethical is back charging. I don't think that was mentioned. Withholding payments was, but back charging is where you wait towards the end of a project and then tell the subcontractor, oh, we cleaned up for you on this whole project. So instead of owing you $20,000, we only owe you $12,000. So there's a back charge. That's not being fair or transparent. As these things were occurring, they should have been informed of what was going on. So that's kind of an unethical behavior by contractors, where they do that and they use that as leverage. And near the end of the project, the subcontractor doesn't have very much leverage, and so that's negotiated down, and that's really coming out of their profit, if they have any after that. So Ellis Don has this sort of subcontractor bill of rights that they have, and really, I took this quote from Jeff Smith. He came to the college to speak on ethics, I guess about 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe it's 7 or 8 now, I don't know, time flies. A corporation exists to give meaning to the people that work there. It is the absolute foundation of which you stand on. It's the way you live. It's the example you set. Argue facts that are unfair. Stand up for yourself. Really very powerful lecture that he gave on ethics and some of the things, and quite frankly, as a corporation, sometimes how they lose projects only because somebody else is bribing somebody else. But that's okay. We're not going to stoop to their level. We're not going to get into that fray. And that's an aspect of a company that operates ethically and wins a lot more than they lose. And so this subcontractor bill of rights is really how they treat their subcontractors. And it's 90% of projects, as we've discussed, or more, are built by our subcontractors. And so we want to have the best subcontractors. So they develop this code of rights, or a bill of rights, and to try to ensure that their subcontractors are treated fairly by their employees. Now you're talking a company that's got thousands of employees, and so you got to make sure that your employees understand the value sets of this business and what is appropriate and not appropriate in this business. Otherwise, you can have people doing ad hoc things that will cause a lot of problems to the brand and to the business, as you've kind of seen from these lectures that we've been doing. So price shopping, that's the same as bid shopping. Bid shopping, price shopping will be an employment termination event. And so then he defines price shopping, right? And basically, it is one of the most unethical practices in the industry. It will not be tolerated. If an employee does this once, they will be formally warned. If they do it twice, they will be let go. They will be terminated. Regardless of tenure or seniority, doesn't matter if you were there 30 years. If any subcontractor has a concrete evidence or proof of bid shopping, they are welcome to contact the CEO directly. So a very sort of forceful line there. 2, the low qualified sub at closing gets the job. Now they define this that we need to make sure that we get all the info on every price at closing so we know which price to carry. If you're the low qualified, so the key word there is qualified. They do a lot of work to make sure the sub is qualified. So if they're going to accept a price from you, they check that you are capable of doing this work. So that's important, right? So cause sometimes you might, if you just had a bid that was thrown in that you didn't pre-qualify, well, you might not want to go with that bid because you don't feel they're capable of doing the work to the quality expectation that it requires. But if they're qualified and you spent all that time estimating, you're going to find out how much work estimating is. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of cost involved. You're going to get the project. CM does define that maybe it depends on the client because the client has the final say generally in a CM type project of who you're going to hire for your subs. So that has a little bit of nuance to it. But on a design bid build or a lump sum, what I'm saying, contract, you're going to have this process. No back charges. So this is what I was saying just a minute ago. No back charges. Doesn't mean, and they define it, right? So they define it. Doesn't mean you don't really get like a back charge, but it's like when it happens. So if you didn't clean up the site, you're going to get the site super pulling you aside or the PM pulling you aside and saying, look, we had to clean that up. There was 3 laborers. It took them 4 hours. This is $400, right? You'd know at that time. It's not that you would be doing it over the whole project and they say, we cleaned up 32 times after your thing and it's $32,000 that you are getting off your price. No, you're being transparent as things go on, or you're saying directly, and the next time this is what's going to happen. So are you going to clean this the next time? You're making it clear. So it's not that you're being soft on subcontractors, but you're being clear and you're being transparent and you're setting the expectations and you're being consistent. Which if I'm a subcontractor, I'm cool with that. I know what I got to do and then I do it. And if I make it mess up, well, okay, there's that little cost in this part, but I can deal with it. Timely payment. So they're not going to hold back a pile of extra money and they're going to pay in a timely fashion. The Construction Lien Act in Ontario changed in 2018. It's now just called the Construction Act, and that includes fast payment for contractors. So there's like this 30-day requirement now that has shortened the time because it was getting to be like 90 days with a lot of contractors. So they had to do something, the government. So they put in this legislation that you're supposed to be paid quicker and you're supposed to be able to get decisions on if there's a holdback for whatever the reasons much quicker. How well it's working, I can't tell you yet. It's in its infancy, but this is the new legislation. But having worked with Elliston, I can tell you that as soon as that legislation came in place, their time frame for payments for work, it followed it, and it made sure it was much quicker. Before I'd say that probably 45 days, which was industry standard, but a lot of people in industry were like 60 and 90 days. And then legislation changes, boom, they're right on it. So that's an indicator. Because they want to make, it's okay if I'm a sub and I know I'm going to get paid in this long, and then I've made that into my pricing and this is what it is, and then I get that cash flow, I'm okay. But if I'm expecting it and I don't get it, that could potentially make me bankrupt because maybe I don't have the liquidity to pay my employees. And responsiveness to subcontractors, getting back to people when they want to be gotten back to. So really, it is trying to make sure that they are able to get the best people in the business and they want to be the most desirable contractor to work with. That way you can attract the best. If you attract the best, you're going to be able to do the best when 90% of the work is being done by subcontractors. Just think of that. So that's an important business practice, and that's tying ethics into action, and that's being the moral, from going back to the previous lecture, 9A, that's taking the moral management view of construction. So I'll just tie back here now, if I can get this here. There we go. So I'm going to close with another Warren Buffett quote, and this one's been around for a while. He's done it in a number of different ways from the early 1990s all the way through. So if you're not sure whether a decision you are about to make is ethical, I ask the managers to judge every action they take, not just by legal standards, though obviously that's the first test, what's legal, but also by what I call the newspaper test. If a manager expresses uncertainty, Buffett says he asks them how they would feel about any given action if they know it was to be written up the next day in their local newspaper. So for us, I guess that would be, say, the Toronto Star or the Globe and Mail. Would you want your your picture on the front page with this article on what you just did? What would your family think? What would your friends think about this? And if you think that you would not be happy about that, then that's helping you to determine this is not a good decision for you to be making. So, and he also tells them that the article would be written by a smart but pretty unfriendly reporter and read by the family, friends, and neighbors. It's pretty simple, he says. If the decision passes that test, it's okay. If anything is close to the lines or it's out of the lines, don't do it. Because sometimes people justify and they try to rationalize. It's a simple way just to think about, oh, okay, if it was in the front page of the paper, what would I don't want it there. Okay, don't do it. Don't do it. So keep that in mind. I got that from this article on CNBC. I think it's a little bit longer article if you like, but there's the link to it. Pretty good article there. So if you want to check it out, I think I'll have these slides loaded so you could always click on it. All right, so hopefully that's given you a good introduction to construction ethics and some of the things that occur and happen and are tempted in the construction industry. There's that aspect of bribery, there's bid shopping, there's financial statement misgivings, and really it's about being honest, transparent, and having integrity in the work and practices and the professionalism that you do. So take that to heart, think about it, and that's what I wanted to cover today. So Tom Stephenson signing off, wishing you a great evening. Bye for now.